Hey Stitchers and friends, welcome to the Endangered Stitches YouTube channel. I am Saressa Newsom, founder and stitch coach at Endangered Stitches. Today we are going to do a little beginner's knitting. So grab your knitting needles and a ball of yarn and stay tuned. So we're going to start with a slip knot. There are many ways to create a slip knot, and I will show you the method that I like to teach. So you're going to take the end from the middle of your ball. So you have your working yarn, and the end, you're going to fold it over. So you have the short end and then the long end that's coming from your ball. You're going to cross the short end over the long end to create a loop. And then you're going to take your fingers from your right hand. I am right-handed, and most of our instructions will be in the right-handed perspective. Take two fingers in my right hand. I'm going to bring them through the loop, and I'm going to grab the long end, and I'm going to hold that short end so it doesn't move, and I'm just going to gently pull the yarn through that loop to create my slip knot. Then I'm going to take my needle with my right hand and put it through that loop, and I'm going to pull the long end to tighten the loop around my needle. Not too tight, you should still be able to move your knitting needle. Now I'm going to transfer my needle to my left hand, and I'm going to pick up my other needle, and we're going to start to cast on. The cast on method will be our knit cast on. I like to use this method because while you're casting on, you're also learning the knit stitch. So I'm going to take my working needle and insert it from the left to the right of the loop that's on the left hand needle. That's actually your first stitch. Then I'm going to take my working yarn. Make sure you're not taking the short end by mistake. And I'm going to wrap it over the top around the needle in the back. And I'm going to hold it to create a little bit of tension, and with the tip of my right hand needle, I'm going to push that yarn down and out from under that first stitch, and I'm going to transfer that stitch onto my left hand needle from left to right, just like that, and I'm sliding my right hand needle off. So I'm going to continue that until I get my desired number of stitches onto my left hand needle, and that's going to be 10 for us today. So I have 2 stitches so far. So I'm going to insert my working needle from left to right and behind that left needle. I'm going to take my working yarn, wrap it over the top, bring that yarn down and under that last stitch, and I have a loop. I'm going to insert my left hand needle into that loop from left to right and just transfer from my right needle over to my left needle. I have 3 stitches now, and I'm going to continue until I have 10. So I'm inserting my needle into that stitch left to right. I'm going to wrap my yarn over the top of that back needle and bring that yarn down and out. I'm going to enter my left needle into that stitch from left to right just to transfer that stitch from my right needle over to my left. So I'm just building my stitches here. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to continue until we have 10. It's the same process. I'm not doing much with my left hand. I'm just holding the yarn and maneuvering it so that it's clear where I'm going to place my right hand working needle. And I'm holding everything just to create some tension so it's not loose and doing whatever it wants. I want to control my stitches and my needles. I have one more stitch. Transfer it right over. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 stitches on my knitting needle. So now that we have 10 stitches on our left hand needle, we're going to build on that row of stitches. So now we're going to knit. Similar to how we did the knit cast on, you insert your needle from the left to the right of the first stitch. We're working our way back from right to left. And then you're going to wrap your yarn over the top of that back needle. You're going to create a little pressure, drop that yarn down, but instead of transferring this loop onto the left needle, we're going to push our stitches towards the end, and we're going to drop that first stitch off of the needle. So now we're building needles on stitches onto the right needle. So I'm going to continue until I reach the end. I'm going to go into the next stitch from left to right into the back of the left needle. I'm going to wrap my yarn around the top of the right needle, and I'm going to push that yarn down through that loop, and I'm just going to drop that stitch off of the left needle. It may be a little scary, but you have to trust yourself here. Insert your needle again from the left to the right. Wrap your yarn around the top. Pull that yarn right under that stitch on your left hand needle and drop it off. I'm going to continue. Insert your needle from left to right. Wrap your yarn around the top. Pull that stitch down under through that loop and drop it off of your left hand needle. And I'm going to continue that until I get to the end of this row. And once you get a hang of this, you will be knitting. That's all there is to it. It may be a little difficult at first to figure out how to hold the needles and maneuver the yarn at the same time. So I usually recommend that you do what works best for you, what feels comfortable. With practice, it will become easy. Just start somewhere. So to continue, I will turn my needle around and I will continue right to left. So when you knit every row, which is what we're doing here, that is called garter stitch. I tend to give a little bit of extra information that may not be necessary during the time, but when you hear it, you will remember that you heard that from Endangered Stitches when you were watching the beginner's knitting video. Okay, so when you do a garter stitch, you'll start to see little kind of ridges in your knitting. It's not going to be the smooth knitting that you're probably used to seeing in store-bought sweaters. So I'm going to continue to knit every row. I'm going to transfer again and work my way back right to left. You should have the same number of stitches because we're not doing any increasing or decreasing. So if it's helpful to count your stitches, do that while you're working so you know that you haven't picked up or dropped anything by mistake. So I'm going to continue to work this up a few more rows, and then we'll talk about binding off. Okay, so we have worked up quite a few rows, and we are going to bind off after we finish this last row of knitting. So once we knit our last row, we're going to turn our needle over and transfer it to our left hand. And then we are going to proceed to bind off by first knitting the first 2 stitches, just how we normally knit. 1, 2. So you have 2 stitches on your right hand needle and the remaining stitches still on your left hand needle. So we knit the 2. We're going to take our left hand needle and place it under that first stitch that we knit and try to get that first stitch over. So you're going to pass it over the second stitch and off of your knitting needle. So that's your first bound off stitch. So you had 2 and now you have 1. So we're decreasing our stitches and closing off our knitting. So you're going to knit your next stitch so you have 2 stitches on your right needle. And again, you're going to take your left hand needle, insert it into that first stitch and over the top of the second one and off of the needle. I'm going to continue. Knit 1 more stitch, enter your needle into that left stitch, that first stitch, pass it over your second stitch. So you'll see you're closing off your row of stitches. As I get to the last stitch, I'm going to knit. I have 2 stitches left on my right hand needle, and I'm going to pass my needle under that first stitch, cross it over that last stitch, and I will be left with 1 loop on my needle. When I'm left with that 1 loop, I'm going to cut a length of yarn, usually about 5 or 6 inches, depending on your project. You may need a longer end so that you can weave in or sew together pieces. But generally, you cut your yarn in and you have a loop left. And I'm just going to pass that yarn in through the loop and pull it all the way through. And pull it to tighten it. And that's the basics.